Welcome to La Vida Las Vegas podcast. We're two physical therapists living the life in Las Vegas. I'm Dr. Erica.
And I'm Dr. Joe. We created this podcast for two reasons. First, to connect the healthcare, wellness, and fitness communities in Las Vegas. And second, to highlight all the amazing people we've met along the way.
Thank you for listening, and remember to take care of yourself.
Well, welcome to the show. If you want to say your name and tell us what you do.
Yeah. Well, number one, thank y'all for having me. This really is a great opportunity to be here. My name is Kody, and I'm a training manager for a company called Amentum in Las Vegas.
So what does Amentum do?
Amentum has a pretty broad scope of different contracts, but typically they go after government contracts in the aerospace realm. My particular role within Amentum is the training manager for the security aspect. So there's various military installations in Southern Nevada that requires a guard force, and I ensure that all those personnel are trained in accordance with the statement of work, so on and so forth. So.
How does one get into doing that?
Well, actually, I just showed up. I was actually at the wrong building, and they're like, "Oh, hey, we need somebody."
You're working for Grubhub at the time, and
Yep.
to drop off their order.
I'm glad I showed up at the wrong address.
Yeah,
hey, it all worked out. Fake it till you make it.
That's right.
But I think traditionally some type of obviously a security background for this particular company, a military background is preferred. But once you get into the more training aspects or the more corporate style or positions, they want someone that has more than just those hard skills. You need those very critical soft skills, learning how to create some positive outcomes, in emotionally charged situations, being confident talking to groups of people, or, coming up with some long-term strategic goals, and so on and so forth. So, but as far as me, how did I get into it? Mm-hmm. I cut my teeth in the SEAL teams from 2003 to 2011, where I learned those foundational skills, learning how to shoot, move, communicate. Then for the 7 years after that or so, I worked throughout the Middle East doing some low profile, like personal security type stuff. And my wife, Lauren, she says, you've been going out the country quite a bit, let's see about working stateside. And things kind of aligned for certain reasons, and I got a phone call from an old friend of mine. He said that they just won a contract in Las Vegas, and would I be interested? And I felt as if this was a good time for me to kind of take that next step professionally, and it's really been a wild ride these past couple of years. I did not know what I was stepping into, and this has kind of been my first real test of leadership and communication with people that don't necessarily see eye to eye with you, and being able to find ways to work through that. Because like in the SEAL teams, or when you're working in any type of small team environment, typically while you are working with strong personalities, the people are motivated for the same end result. So it's a little bit easier working with those personalities. Now that I've shifted gears into a much bigger scope of, I think, maybe 200 plus people of varying backgrounds, ages, demographics, and mindset, it's been rough, but it's been a great learning experience for me, for sure.
So how do you go about when people are maybe a little bit different, or you're working with Generation Z or whatever the next letters are after that? I'm assuming that you have to communicate with them a little bit differently than you do, and probably leadership, they might even look at that differently as well, respond to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think number one, you have to knowing your audience is key, and that's going to knowing obviously the situation, but knowing who you're talking to and kind of what their motives are is kind of the first step in that process. And what's difficult for a leader is that it's hard to do that, and if you only have one kind of tool to pull from in your toolbox, because it's worked for you in the past, or maybe that's how you were taught how to communicate or lead people, you're you're going to fail at some point. And that's something that I've had to learn kind of along the way. When I was in the military, basically at the end of each type of exercise or any type of training event, we would gather everyone up and we would talk about our failures so that we could all learn from it. Didn't really talk about too much about the good parts of it, but they were just kind of driving home where you messed up and how to fix it. And it worked well for me. And I brought that into some other various training roles I've been in, and I found that that definitely does not work for everyone. So for a leader, it's really important to have other tools in your toolbox. Specifically, you're talking about with Generation Z. Actually, that's funny. My wife's dissertation is on that exact same subject. And while I have not read it yet, I've had a lot of talks with her about it. And from what she's finding is that your Generation Z, or the personnel that are just coming into this workforce, they're butting heads with our baby boomers. And what leadership style they like is more of a authentic leader, someone who leads by example. They want to know what type of company or what is the company doing to create some positive social change, and I think they need to have a small task to do. They need to know the why behind it, and they need that constant praise. Hey, you did a good job. Where others maybe before them, you could maybe give more broad left and right lateral limits to, hey, just get this job done, figure it out. They need a little bit more structured approach. And as far as the why behind it, I think that's something that everyone needs to know or should know. And as a leader, you should be telling your people not just what to do, but how to do it. Where does their little piece of that puzzle fit into the broader picture of things, so that whenever they run into problems, they can think critically and for themselves in order to get the job done. So I think a lot of leaders kind of fail in that aspect.
I think it's also maybe I've worked at a bunch of different jobs, and a lot of times people would guard information because it made them feel more important, or you would always have to come to them. But what you're doing is you're crippling your staff because they don't understand why they're doing anything, and they hit one roadblock, and now they don't know how to, what they should be doing next. They do nothing. Yep,
absolutely. And that's, one thing that, I think leaders need to kind of understand or should understand is that, by empowering your people, you're for the bigger picture for the company, you're creating an environment where those underneath you take ownership of the problem, as well as they grow professionally, and as they grow and they get better at their job, it just makes you look better.
Oh, for sure.
But like I said, I think maybe we even talked a little bit about it earlier, is that nature versus nurture debate. And leading is one of those things that I personally believe that you just you're not born with all the answers. It's definitely a trial by error type of thing. And in the military, it's really interesting. I kind of look back at it. At 18, 19, 20 years old, these young men and women are put in positions where they are responsible for 4, 6, 8 people, and they themselves are just learning how to lead. So it's interesting.
So what made you want to join the military?
It's a good question. So I am an old man now, coming up on 36. So September 11th happened when I was a junior in high school, and that was kind of a little defining moment for me. I decided that I wanted to join the military after that, but I knew maybe it was just the ego side of me that I didn't want anybody to be able to say that their job was harder than mine or whatnot. So I wanted to join some type of special operations unit. At the time, my dad wouldn't sign the paperwork, so I couldn't go the special forces route. A year later, when I turned 18, after doing some more research, I decided to join the SEAL teams, probably just because it had a cooler name, so I just wanted to do my part, defend my country, and I wanted to, I guess, not shoot for mediocrity. I come from a little small town outside of Baton Rouge, and most people my age, they would go into a lot of these plant jobs, Georgia Pacific, Exxon, so on and so forth. And I felt as if, I could always come back and do that. I felt as if from an early age, I wanted to, kind of shoot for the stars, so to speak. And, with that, there's a lot of risk to it, but I personally believe no great person's ever accomplished anything without taking risk, just like you guys here,
Too kind. So what was that experience like, training for, 18 years old, and you're like, okay, I'm going to join the SEALs. Did you train for that? And then you were automatically ready to go through buds? And
I don't think anyone's ever ready for that.
I can do 10 push-ups on my own. I'm good.
Hey, I'm good. What's the bare minimum?
Yeah.
I can do that. So I, at the time, just did as much research as I could. There was limited research at that time compared to now. I think now you could just look online and know every single thing about it and what's to come. But even with that information, nothing really going to truly prepare you for that. But I think there was like a little SEAL program out there where you run and push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, and swim just to kind of get you ready for the PFT. And little did I know is that I was horrible at swimming. Something I just never grew up with, and the combat side stroke that I was supposed to be doing and that I was training on was absolutely wrong. So that was something that I struggled with all the way, through buds was my side stroke.
So the wrestling alligators in Louisiana
didn't
prepare
help.
you for
No,
that?
or the
help.
crawfish?
The crawfish.
No.
I think it made my gut bigger than anything.
What is the side stroke? Can you describe it?
So the side stroke is basically, my understanding is a way or a method of swimming that lowers your profile in the water, as well as, it's more of an endurance type of stroke where, the freestyle or breaststroke or stuff like that, those are definitely superior in the fact they're faster, but it tires you out quicker. And the side stroke, and you're laying on your side, and you're keeping your hands below the water line, so it's supposed to lower your overall signature.
Mm-hmm. So you keep a little bit more of a lower profile in the water, but you just, and then your head's underneath the water, and you take breaths just on the side. So are you doing mostly kicking with like a regular like freestyle kick?
Yeah. So you're laying horizontal on your side, and your legs are kicking the entire time if you have fins, and basically your bottom arm just kind of mainly just stays extended, and that top arm creates the momentum and kind of helps guide you. So you want to stay below the water as much as you can, because the lower your head is, it pops your hips up. So most people they swim with their head above water, and then what you find is once your head goes up, your legs sink, so you're constantly kind of swimming like this, which obviously isn't very productive, and it expends a lot of energy. So, you'll swim every few strokes, and then just kind of look, maybe pop your head up, maybe a pregnant pause, so to speak, to ensure that your bearing or your guiding is correct and you're not off course. So, little secret I can say now because I'm out of the military is. So you have to pass a certain amount of 2 mile, I think a minimum of 2. I'm not sure what it is now. 2 mile ocean swims. And I passed one, but I was struggling on that second one, and it was kind of do or die time. So a partner of mine, Tim, which I owe probably graduating buds to him, is once he volunteered to be my swim partner at this time because he was like the fastest swimmer there. We went out to the buoy, and we got this some 1-inch tubular nylon, and we tied it to my guide hand, and his belt. And he basically was a tugboat for me. I wound up passing that evolution flying colors. So thank you, Tim.
Good job.
Yeah, if you're not cheating, you're not trying.
That's right. So when you were going through training, were your thoughts, is this crazy that I get to learn this stuff, or your thoughts just like try and survive the day every day? Like, what was your perception of what was going on
During buds?
just
specifically,
either?
Well, your optic kind of changes with your stress level, and specifically to buds. What I've found then is that the more the stress levels, the higher the stress levels are, you really need to change your perspective, and that's true in buds or really in life in general. The higher your stress, you really need to kind of bring your world into just the things that you can control and focus in on those things. That kind of came to a precipice during Hell Week for me. So we broke out. We started a Hell Week on Sunday, and then Monday morning, I believe it was, we had to do this thing called a chow run, where you put the boats on your head and you race each boat team. And as you come across the finish line, they'll take the winners and they can get chow. And the losers keep running, and then they'll slowly start securing people from there. So get the boat on my head, and I just go 100 miles an hour, everything I get for like that one lap. But then we kept going, and we went a second and third, and I don't know how many laps we did, but I was completely exhausted. I got my MRE, and I'm just sitting there looking at the ocean, and my whole world is collapsing around me. I started, my mind started to wander. I started thinking about my future and how my family was going to disown me, and I was going to have to go to a ship, and I would never accomplish my goals and dreams. And I just took a second to think, well, okay, Kody, you can never, you won't be able to do the next chow run, but you can do every evolution up until chow, and then you'll just quit then. And then as that got me through about 24, 48 hours, and then it got to, all right, Kody, look, just finish this one evolution, and then you'll quit afterward. And then, finally the last couple of days, it was just, you're kind of in zombie mode, and you're just, you're not going to quit. You're just going to do whatever they ask you to, because you're completely broken down at that point. So looking back at that, by kind of lowering or honing in what you can control, was really the key factor for success for me. And rarely do people quit during an evolution. They typically quit, I know this now, they quit after the evolution. And that's kind of weird to think about it, because at that time, me sitting there, I didn't have an instructor in my ear yelling at me, telling me, how horrible I was. Was under no physical stress at all. I was just sitting down eating, and yet I wanted to quit. So by kind of detaching yourself and kind of looking at it from a different perspective helps tremendously.
Do you think they intentionally do that, like set you alone and kind of give you time to think a little bit?
They have every different method possible. I think the first phase instructors are, sadistic in some ways, but it's all for a reason. It's you have to be put in those situations from varying different ways, to see if you really are getting the best product at the end. That's what our nation wants. That's what it needs.
Were there ever things in the training that surprised you?
Well, I think coming in as a new guy, everything is new to you.
As far as maybe how some tasks they showed you, like how simple they were compared to what you thought they would be,
right?
Or maybe technology-wise.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would say this. The grass is never greener. And nothing. There's a lot more to the job than just what you see in the pamphlets. What I found is that there really is no secret sauce to what our special operations guys are doing that make them different than some of your conventional units, other than, specifically, I think, obviously they get more, there's more funding dedicated to them, and they have more, resources to train. But when you look at the actual training, they're just taking some very, very simple concepts that have been proven over time, and they're just rehearsing them to the best of their ability, because, once you go out, say into the field, or, you're actually operating, when things do go sideways, which they inevitably always do, you can, always fall back on those standard operating procedures. And easiest one to always remember is, cover and move. And that's, one element's moving while another element is providing cover fire. And that's something that is, I'm up, they see me, I'm down, or one's base. I remember going back to Bud's, one's base, two's back. And that's just kind of the fundamentals of combat, I guess, as well as in the team. So there was some interesting, technology. There were some really nice night vision and some little handheld drones and whatnot. But truth be told, when I first came into the SEAL teams in 2005, we were still using, Vietnam era tactics as far as our patrol to contact. And actually, we kind of brought in some Rangers. I say we, I mean the larger powers that be. And they started looking at some after action reports and really changing the way we did our formations, conducted our patrol to contact. And it's just kind of interesting that in the early 2000s you're still using tactics that are decades old and they're from a completely different war. So as we've progressed into 20 years into our global war on terrorism, the technology piece has just skyrocketed. And I've been out like 9 years now, and it seems like yesterday, but I still operate, or I still work kind of alongside or with those entities overseas, and the technology piece that they bring to the table gives them such a great capability of being able to understand where your forces are on the battlefield, and they can communicate instantaneously with everyone, as well as other assets. So it's come a long way.
Yeah, I've actually heard several people say that before, that the tactics in like the early 2000s were pretty old, I guess you could say, from the Vietnam era. But I would also assume, too, that's a very different setting than being like in mountains in Afghanistan and other countries. Mm-hmm. Were you part of learning how to adapt from that? So if you were in 2005, you said?
Yeah, graduated Bud in 2004. My first platoon was in 2005.
So were they starting off training you more of the Vietnam era stuff, or was that already changing over at that time?
It was starting to transition, I believe, at that time. Obviously, as a brand new guy, your optic is like, very, very small, but you could see that the gear were starting to transition from the Vietnam era style, as well as some of the maneuvers. And then I think when I came back from my second platoon, they actually had a cadre that was more diverse. They actually brought in, I think, some former Rangers. All right, guys, that's your second shout out, guys, as well as some other people from varying disciplines to really enhance what we're doing, which I think is smart. In any organization or culture, it's proven that the more diverse people or backgrounds you can bring to the table, it just enhances the end product, so you're not creating an echo chamber. So
for sure, I think that would translate really well to a lot of different things nowadays.
Yeah, unfortunately, the in any community you belong to, especially within the military, they think that they have a tendency to think that their way is the best, and everyone else doesn't know what they're doing, when I think in reality we're all cut from the same exact cloth, and we have a lot to learn from each other.
Now, speaking, when you have this experience from the Buds, and you have that training, and then also just serving as a special operations and doing that now into a little bit more security, how has your thought process maybe has changed as you gain more knowledge and you've seen the evolution of your career? What things do you feel like you see and you're like, wow, I wish I knew that 5-10 years ago?
Right. Gosh, if we only had a time machine, right? I would say a couple of things. Number one, and that's really hard for any young man or woman to understand, is that perception is reality. And that's something I did not want to hear as a young frogman. I thought at that time that as long as I can shoot, move, communicate, close in and destroy our enemy, that's the job, and that's what I'm here to do. What does it matter what color socks I'm wearing, or sideburn links and whatnot. And it took me, actually, was probably, as I look back, a lot of times in my life, it really took me kind of getting hit over the head and kind of getting in trouble numerous times to understand that it's not just about you. There's a bigger picture that goes into it. And while as a young E4, E5, you're not seeing, you can't see the big picture, and how you present yourself does in fact play a big picture, not necessarily as far as the operation is concerned, but even just getting the operation. You may not get that call or that task to do something because of, maybe how someone else viewed you walking down the street in a horrible uniform. I mean, that's just that. It's horrible. It doesn't that particular example or that particular object does not have any weight in how you would perform your job, but it is what it is, And how I kind of grown from that today is while I know my own capabilities, I know my my level of professionalism. That doesn't mean everybody else knows that. So I ensure that I'm putting forth that best version of myself to everyone, and that's actually overseas that has helped me, as well as some people I've kind of talked to, kind of tried to help them along the process. It has helped us get other operations or could continue our operations, even just something so simple as just opening a door for someone. Yeah, that's not my job, but it means something to that person, and they're going to think about that down the road, or ensuring you're going above and beyond just to ensure that someone else is successful in what they're doing, even though that's not my job. We're all kind of working together, and they're going to remember that for days and weeks down the road. So
it's interesting you say that. Just a few weeks ago, we were somewhere where we had a kind of a business type meeting with a group that does the same stuff that we do. And someone there that we respect said something very similar. They said, if you always hoist other people up, then they'll pull you with them in a sense. So if you just always do things to help other people out, I think it doesn't go unnoticed. Like most people, I think, will actually see that.
Yeah. And as I look back, some of the leaders that I remember weren't necessarily the most tactically proficient people. Obviously, that helps. But what I do remember about those people is how they made me feel. They were looking out or caring for me, and that has carried that carried me through years. I look back and I still remember those people. I don't remember them for their operational prowess or how good they were at their job. I remember how they made me feel as a person. And I look, if I were putting together a team of people, obviously they have to be proficient at their job, obviously, but I would rather have someone that's not as good at doing the job. Those people, they can be molded and they will get better, but they have a way of talking to people or within the team that promotes more cohesion than someone who's kind of like a Ferrari, a Ferrari race car. They are amazing at what they do, but they can't get along with anyone, so.
You're thinking of an example of where leadership was made a profound effect on you later on?
Yes, so gentleman named Jocko or John Willink. I know you've heard of him. For those of you who may not have heard of Jocko, long story short, is he's a brilliant platoon and task unit commander for the SEAL teams. Went to the had an instrumental impact in the push for Ramadi as well as Fallujah, and then had a even bigger impact once he left his role as task unit commander and came into trained detachment. And as where he had the opportunity to really reach a lot of young sailors and young officers, and kind of mold them in a real positive way, and as well as kind of shape the future. And while I never had the opportunity to serve under Jocko in operational capacity, he was kind of instrumental in kind of molding all the platoons, as I said, that came underneath his command during training. And one thing that he did was he ensured to really pay attention to every single person. It doesn't matter how small of a role you had within this operation. He watched you, and he wanted you to understand that your job is mission critical, because it truly is. And he made sure to really give out kind of attaboys, or he praised in public, but it wasn't like a general praise, that's kind of that you see a lot of maybe leaders or people do. He was very specific in what he praised people for, and I remember going into each debrief, just hanging on every word Jocko said. Is he gonna, did he see I did a good job or whatnot? And so basically, that's as a leader, you're trying to ultimately trying to inspire people to work for you or do what you want them to do out of their own free will, and not your your orders. And just by kind of praising in public and being very specific about it went a long way to me, for me. And I still remember to this day going into a debrief and him telling all my peers, like, where's the automatic weapons gunner? Yeah, you. He's like, I wish I could have videoed this, because you were doing this, and this. And so it really made me, every single time after that, just want to go work above and beyond. So I learned that while obviously you grow the most from your failures, you need to learn from your failures, and you need to point out when people do fail. It is extremely important to tell people where they did a good job, how they did a good job, and where it plays into the bigger picture things. So that positive reinforcement is key.
That's an excellent point as far as when it comes to leadership, is that if people like you and they want to impress you or make you happy of whatever they're doing, that is better than any kind of negative reinforcement that you can give anyone, because they, with pride, will want to do that job better just because they respect what you think of them. And that, I think that's extremely powerful.
Absolutely. And, the military, I'm sure they're learning a lot, as far as, the best ways to help your younger leaders. But that's something that, especially on the civilian side of the house, you don't have any type of rank. You can't just tell people what to do arbitrarily and expect them to just fall in line. You have to really work at it, and that's one of the biggest, I guess, reasons why I've kind of was actually forced to grow and find ulterior methods to reach people. Whenever I came over to the training manager position in Amentum, I was no longer working either in the military or overseas with former special operators. So,
did you take any courses or anything that helped you pursue that, or to help you deal with the new different type of class of people you're working with?
Right. So whenever I came to Amentum, I was training manager. One of the courses we had to teach was something called tactical communications, and it sounds really sexy, but it's really not. It's called verbal judo. That's like the proprietary name brand, and basically the goal of this school is to help you de-escalate situations and persuade people to do other things. And while that's not as cool as going to free fall or breacher or sniper school, that one course has really changed the way I look at conflict in general, and it's helped me day in and day out, because every single day you're coming into communication with people, and if you really put forth some effort into applying some of those skills, you'll find that you have much better working relationships with your peers or your superiors, as well as a much better home balance with your spouse. Because humans are messy. We're not computers. We're not 00111001. We hit send and it goes to you, and you automatically interpret that correct. We have a lot of nonverbal things that we may be intentionally or unintentionally sending off to the other person. They may be receiving it incorrectly, as well as we're all very, very emotional, and we have a lot of pressure on us that go into the way we talk and what we say. And that one course has really helped me in life, both professionally and personally.
Outstanding. How well is that taken when you're, we talked about the generational gap from before, when you're teaching this to new recruits that probably have a very different life experience, and I feel like even younger kids now are taught not to fight, they're taught not to, that aggression's bad, but when you're in a setting where you have to teach that sometimes. So is it difficult to train that, or is it difficult to change their mindset on that?
Well, teaching it is one thing, and then obviously doing it is another. Unfortunately, you have to kind of be in a classroom setting first, and you have to talk about these concepts of communication. But I feel as if the real learning takes place when you actually get into scenarios where we have to force these security officers or people to make decisions that move the conversation or the conflict in a positive direction. And you see very early on where they are making mistakes, or they escalate the conflict, or there's a standstill in the conversation. And anytime there's kind of a standstill in conflict, that's just more time where things can go south. And you can kind of see it whenever there's news reporters or whatnot. Whenever there's conflicts, they're reporting on out in the street, like arguments between two people. You can from an outside perspective, you can watch it develop, and even if someone's trying to maybe de-escalate it or not come into conflict with the other person, that doesn't mean conflict doesn't exist. And there you can kind of at some point see where everything is kind of hit a kind of everything's at a standstill, and no positive traction is being made, and that really jeopardizes at minimum one of those parties. So I feel as if by being able to kind of get out of my own comfort zone and kind of harass some of these students, kind of hit them with different arguments, it gets them thinking quickly, and they can learn in a controlled environment, so to speak.
Is there an inspiration from, you watch some movies or something and you're like, okay, I'm going to be this character today, and then this is what I'm going to do?
Space or anything.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. So, no, I try to, it just kind of, I feel as if it just develops. So we have, I think if you were to train to this, I would say, make a list of, your top 5 type of situations that typically occur within that business, or between, manager and subordinates, or employees and the public. What are kind of those top 5 instances, and then put your people in that conflict, and then give them, the tools they need to move that conversation in a positive direction. Some of the things that we talk about, number 1 is the importance of your nonverbals. Before, I walked into this room, and as soon as we made eye contact, we were communicating. So I try to, tell our young men and women, smile, as well as open hands. A lot of times you'll see people's posture, like this, or a lot of officers, they may have their hands on their belt, just because it's kind of a relaxing position for them, but it's sending some negative signals to other people. So by just kind of having an open hand approach when you talk to people, I kind of think of that talkative Italian. He likes to talk with his hands. Well, by doing that, it kind of puts the other person kind of at ease. I don't know if it's something psychological that you don't have anything in your hands, but I found that helps. And then from there, honestly, there's no secret. It's just really trying to develop empathy with the other person. And I feel as if empathy is stronger than love, because you can love someone, you can marry them, they can take your last name, they can bear your kids, but they can also never listen to your point of view on anything. So by taking the time to actively listen to someone, listen to their problems, and dive into the conflict and try to find that root source of the problem, and being able to paraphrase it back to them, it shows them that you are listening to them. You're giving them something that their partner of 10, 15 years doesn't give them on a daily basis, and you can really connect with them. And that doesn't solve the problem, but at least initially it can help bring them from a 10 to a 9 to an 8 into a much more manageable conversation where you can work together to find an amicable resolution, versus, hey, you're wrong, I'm right, and because I'm in a leadership role, I'm going to tell you where you're wrong and what you need to do. And that only gets you so far. And even if it does work, you lose in the long term, because now you're basically making someone do something that they don't want to do, or they don't have all the information to know why it's best for them that they do it. So yeah, you may win in the short term, but you're going to ultimately lose in the long term.
Is that stuff that you learned within that course as well?
Absolutely. So in the in special operations, you don't really learn how to communicate with people other than the guns that's in your hands. So coming into a role where I had to teach others how to communicate with Americans, that was foreign ground to me, and I think it's probably one of the biggest reasons why I love the course so much, because I was learning new knowledge and enhancing myself professionally. So,
what's something in whether it's your work life or just life in general that you wish more people knew about?
About myself? That people?
Just in general, like if you see something and you're like, man, if they just did this, it would help them a lot.
Wow. I don't know. What do you think?
It's a good.
What's yours?
It's a good.
I'm trying to think.
There's probably a lot of things. I think the main one in my profession would be that you could do something about your physical ailment. That it's not, like, injuries happen.
You can do it yourself.
Well, there's something that you can do about it to make it better.
Gotcha.
It's about 90% of the time, 95% of the time you can.
Well, how about this? Your wife is always right.
So that starts once you're married, right?
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, and if you the headache is reduced if you just do it her way, man.
Was this also taught in that verbal judo course? The wife subsection.
Jocko makes a really good, actually, in one of his books, which I would recommend reading, even if you're not in the military at all. It will definitely help you in your personal life as well as your professional life. Just learning how to lead and communicate with people. Great author. But one thing he says in there is when you're dealing with your superiors, obviously check your ego. One of his nice famous quotes is, "Ego is like reactive armor. Once the harder you push against it, the harder it pushes back." And he's absolutely correct. And a lot of our disputes revolve around, sometimes, a lot of times, our ego and pride. And it's hard to kind of detach yourself from that situation and put your ego and pride aside. And once you do that, and you're talking to your superiors, try to look at the problem and ask yourself, is it really worth either addressing to begin with. Is it really going to change the outcome? Maybe just because it's not your plan or the way you want to do things, is it really going to matter that much? And is it going to bring that relationship in a positive direction, or is it going to bring your relationship in a negative direction? So by fighting with your wife, is it really going to change the outcome that much? Because ultimately you're probably just going to do what she wants anyway. So.
Wise words. Yeah. So what's something that you've been working on professionally, personally, physically, just something that you're excited about?
Right. All right. So I feel as if it's so easy to either get into a career or a rhythm, and next thing you know, like 5-10 years goes by, and you're still kind of in that same spot because it's comfortable. And I think maybe maybe CrossFit came up with it. What is that slogan? The comfort zone, right? It's a beautiful place where nothing grows. And yeah, so I feel as if you should always be growing in some way, either spiritually, academically, professionally, personally, some way. I try to set goals, a goal in each one of those every year. So professionally, like I said, I've been in the contract realm for many years now. I'm at the point in my life where I'm looking for a more stable career, and I have iron in the fire back on the East Coast. We should learn something this week, and if so, we'll be moving. Lauren and I will be moving to the East Coast, and with that new job is just a plethora of new opportunities that could develop. And then academically, so I just graduated with my undergrad, and I'm, I don't want to stop there. I want to continue on to my master's, and either depending on what if this career opportunity pops or not. If it does, I'll try to learn that job a little bit more and see where or what subject I should kind of jump into as far as what master's program would best benefit me on that side of the house. But if it doesn't, Lauren and I will probably move to Tampa, Florida, and I'll pursue a project management degree. So try to use my skills and clearance and academic knowledge, so to speak, to get a project manager job somewhere.
I would have guessed interpretive dance, but
yeah. Well, you obviously haven't seen my dance moves.
Yeah, that's right.
One of our favorite questions is, what's your favorite cheat meal?
What's my favorite cheat meal? That is actually easy. It's the first thing that pops in my mind, and that is a meat lover's pizza with pineapple, because I like to mix some sweet and savory, from Chicago's Pizza on Durango, I believe. They do not skimp on the protein. They add it. It's a heavy pizza, and I love it. I go to that. In fact, sometimes that's just my primary meal and not my cheat meal.
Nice. So what's something you want to leave the listeners with?
I wish you would have prepped me with these questions beforehand.
Yeah. We'll start emailing them.
Yeah, right. I would say this, and it's been said many times, but today's, 2020 was a huge year for us as a nation, and there's so many differences of opinions, and people feel very strongly about their beliefs or what they think the way things should be. I would say number one, do yourself a favor and educate yourself. If you care enough to post about something or put your opinion on social media for the world to see, do yourself a favor and actually do some research on it. I feel as if a lot of people don't do that because it takes time and effort. And then number two, before making that decision or before making any decision that could affect others, is number one, try to look at it from their point of view, because there's always more to the story than what your very narrow optic or belief is on the subject. And if you really care about making a difference, you have to empathize. You have to come together with that other person in order to make a difference. You're not going to make a difference by yourself. And the only way we're actually going to come together as a nation, or just two individuals is by sitting down and talking about why we think that way. And I've had multiple discussions on gun control, riots, as well as, Democrat versus Republican, with people who are 180 degrees from me. And what I found with every single one of those discussions, the more I just sat back and listened to them, let them talk, I was easily able to find some areas in which we did agree on, and then focus on those subjects, and it brought us closer together. So easier said than done, though.
You should write a book. Got some good information. I think your perspective is really good on things. I think your experience has helped you a lot with being able to interpret events and watching people. And
a lot of failing, a lot of trial by error. I want to thank y'all so much for having me on here today. Everyone likes to talk about themselves, right? So thank y'all so much.
Absolutely, Kody. Thank you for coming on.
Yep, our pleasure. We'd like to thank you for listening to La Vida Las Vegas podcast. We hope you enjoyed the time with our guests as much as we did. It would help us out so much if you could share, subscribe, or review our podcast, or any combination of the three. Thanks again, and remember to take care of yourself.